Hello and welcome back to Room 210. Today we're going to open up the books and look at 3 stories of creepy, ghostly encounters. Ghost Guy. I've noticed a lot of stories here about people who rented nice places for very cheap rates only to find out too late that there was a reason it was so cheap. This happened to me also, and I thought I would share some of my experiences there. Most apartments where I live for single bedrooms run somewhere in the $400 to $500 range, which doesn't sound like much when compared with bigger cities. But I honestly thought I was lucky when I found a 2-bedroom apartment in reasonably good condition for only $250 a month. So I jumped at the opportunity. I was excited to get a bigger place than where I was currently living, with not only a cheaper rent, but also with utilities and garbage pickup included, so that I didn't have the extra cost of those things. What I didn't realize is that there was a reason nobody stayed there for more than a couple of months at a time. I went a week before move-in to clean the apartment from top to bottom and get it ready to move into in a few days. I took some friends with me to help, and we found some strange things, some of which included black candles and some strange books. But we didn't really pay too much attention to it. We just figured the people who had left were kind of strange, no big deal. The first night that I stayed after I moved in, I had an odd feeling that I was being watched, but I couldn't place my finger on what was making me feel that way. So I closed all the curtains on the windows just to give myself a little bit more security. The feeling stayed, but I blew it off and went to bed. This happened 2 nights after. So for the first 3 nights, I felt like I was being watched, even with the windows closed. But honestly, being a rational person, I just assumed that it was because of the strange things we had found, and maybe my mind was just making more out of it than it needed to, creeping myself out basically. However, as I sat on the couch reading a book with the apartment completely quiet, ironically even the upstairs neighbors were quiet that night, the feeling became intensified. It was as if someone was standing very close to me, almost looking over my shoulder. But yet again, I tried to blow it off. I moved to the other end of the couch to see if moving positions would help. Maybe it was just some bad feng shui or something. And when I moved, out of the corner of my eye, as I sat back down and began to read again, I saw movement. I sat still and waited to see if it would catch my eye again. And as I sat there, I could distinctly see what looked to be a solid person walking from the bathroom across the living room to the kitchen, stopping midways, staring me down for a few seconds before moving on to the kitchen. The first thought that went through my head was that I was supremely tired and just hadn't realized how tired I was until now. But I was wide awake. I initially froze in fear as this person repeated the behavior at least 4 times before I finally decided to sit and stare in that direction straight on to see if it would happen as I was looking directly that way. To my surprise, it was not an optical illusion at all. Not just an odd shape out the corner of my eye that appeared to look like a person, but an honest-to-goodness, full-fledged apparition. I watched as the young man walked across from the bathroom, stopping midways across the living room, staring me dead in the eye, and then turning and going on into the kitchen. What I did not see was him go back across. A few seconds later, he would appear at the bathroom door and walk across and do the same thing again. I watched this happen several times. By this time, my fear had turned to anger, as startlement usually does with me. So when he stopped on his circuit back through, I demanded of him to know who he was and what he was doing in my house and how he got in to begin with. It was then that I noted what about him looked so strange. As he stood in front of me, glaring at me in what appeared to be anger, I could see that there was a bullet hole on the right side of his forehead just above his eyebrow, and a slow trickle of blood going down into his eyebrow and down the side of his face. That kind of took me aback a little bit. Then I realized this was not a person standing in front of me. This was an apparition, as in ghost apparition, something I never would have believed existed before. In a hateful tone, he replied to me, saying that I would be meeting his boss soon, and that my attitude would change then. It was I that was in the wrong place, not him. I demanded him tell me who he was again, and why he was there, but he only smiled in a spiteful grin and laughed. Then I told him that I didn't like him, I didn't want him in my home, and that he should leave and never come back. It was then that he said, through laughter, that the boss was watching me, and I would soon find out who was really in charge. And then he disappeared right in front of my eyes. Well, needless to say, I was creeped out and didn't do much sleeping that night or the next night. 2 nights later, I met his boss, but that is another story. Ghost Cat. I was going through a hard time and was having to live with a few friends of mine, as I was between jobs and had no place to stay. Needless to say, in situations such as that, beggars cannot be choosers, so I completely disregarded their stories of the house itself being haunted, and moved there anyway. I had many encounters myself while staying there, but the one that sent me packing was the ghost cat. Apparently, I was the first one out of the 3 of us to encounter this particular apparition. I was at home waiting by the phone, hoping that someone would call from one of the applications that I had put in the day before. Seeing as how I had nothing to do, I had plugged up an old VCR they had sitting there and watched some of the old movies that they had on the shelf. As I was watching, I heard the clear, distinct voice of a woman tell me that she was going to kill me. I waited a few seconds, thinking maybe there was a flaw of some type in the tape itself. And yes, that can happen with old VCR tapes. As I sat there a few seconds, I heard the exact same voice say the exact same thing again. So I paused the tape and waited. It didn't take long for the voice to pop up again. I listened for the direction from which the sound was coming, and it was coming from outside through an open window. So I walked over to the window, which looked out on the porch. As I did, I saw a strange cat. Strays are not unusual here, so at first I didn't think much about it until the voice spoke again. As it did, I noticed it was coming from the cat. I gave the cat a closer look, and indeed something was terribly wrong, because cats do not have human eyes. Their pupils are quite distinct. As I stood there transfixed, looking at this creature that was clearly not what it appeared to be, I started to feel panic rise up inside me. I ran into the kitchen and picked up the phone and started calling all of the neighbors to try to find out if the cat belonged to someone and maybe I was just imagining things. No one knew what I was talking about. No one had a cat that matched that description, nor had they seen one in the neighborhood. So I went back to the window. It was still sitting there. I turned around and looked behind me to see if there was anything that I could grab and pick up and possibly open the door up and throw at the cat to make it run away. As I turned back around, I noticed that it had moved down to the other end of the porch where the door was. I suddenly heard the screen door start to shake violently and ran to the other side of the room to look out the door. There was the cat, its nails embedded in the screen itself, pulling desperately against the screen door, which was locked, and screaming with all of its might. Nope, I'm out. I packed my things as quickly as I could, and I was gone before anybody got home. I left a quick short note with a phone number where I could be reached and told them if they had any questions, they could call and ask. But I was not coming back. Gas Station Man. When I was 23 years old, I had a strange experience that has bothered me for these many long years. Even now that I'm in my 40s, I still think back sometimes and wonder what happened that night. Maybe some of you can help me. I pulled into a gas station late at night. There was no one around. No one parked on either side of the station. The town was dead. There was nobody moving. But I had to have gas or I wasn't going to make it home. So I stopped at the 24-hour station and began to fill up the car. As I stood there, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I had heard no one walk up behind me, didn't see a vehicle for them to have come from, and hadn't heard any vehicles pull in on either this side or the other side of the station. I jumped because it had happened so suddenly and spun around. There was a man standing behind me. He was wearing rather raggedy clothes. His t-shirt was full of holes, and so were his jeans, and his broken down boots looked like they had seen better days. Trying not to be judgmental and write him off as just a bum, I asked him if I could help him. He told me he needed a little money to use the payphone, as he needed a ride home. I told him that I didn't have anything but green that I knew of, but that I would check, to just give me a second. I looked down only long enough to unzip the pocket on the side of my wallet that I kept my change in. I told him I didn't have exact change, but that I had enough for him to go inside and he could get exact change for the payphone while I was still looking in my wallet. He didn't answer, so when I looked up, I was really taken off guard that he was gone. I hadn't heard him walk away, and it's not like I wouldn't have seen him in my peripheral vision, at least, since he was standing only about 2 feet away from me. I could hear thunder rumbling and knew it was going to be raining shortly, so I quickly finished filling up my car and made a quick circuit around the gas station, looking in all directions to see if I could find him, to let him know that I would get exact change while I was in the store paying for my gas. But I saw him nowhere. I ran in the station to pay for my gas, and as I did, I noticed that the clerk was looking at me strange, but brushed it aside. I asked her if she saw the man I was just talking to, and with one hand on the phone, her gaze on me suspiciously, she promptly informed me that there was no man standing outside with me. She had been looking out that side of the store when I pulled in, and there was no one there, and she had seen me standing there talking to myself while I was pumping my gas. I explained to her that that's not possible. I was just talking to a young man who needed help with money for a payphone, and could she please tell me which direction he went? She had no problem in telling me that she was highly suspicious of me and asked me if I had taken something before I came to the station. I told her that if anybody was crazy or on dope, it was her, but went ahead and paid for my gas and ran back out of the station and looked around in both directions on the road. I drove a little ways up both ends of the street, but I never did find that man again. Even now it bothers me. Who was he? Where did he come from? Where did he go? Was he a ghost? Was I entertaining angels unaware? I don't know. What do you think? Well, that's our 3 stories for today. What do you think? Were any of these encounters truly ghostly? Or do you think something else was going on? Which one was creepiest to you? Has anything like this ever happened to you? Tell us what you think or what happened in the comments section below. And thank you again for stopping by at room 210 here at the Macabre Motel. Bye-bye. Hey, this is Dead One Rollin saying thanks for stopping by and spending a little time with us here at the Macabre Motel, hanging out here in room 210. Please feel free to comment, rate, and subscribe. And thank you again for spending time with us. Hoping that you may always be a voyeur of the dark side and not a victim.